how I got involved and what it was like being involved, starting in Chicago, working with and I explain to you a little bit about that.
Okay.
I'm ready whenever you guys are.
Well, you can. Okay, so we'll go to the why you started working there, and then why they sent you to.
Well, and then what was part of that?
You seem like you have a vision, but you have to stick to that vision. You cannot bounce. You cannot bounce around.
Okay. I'm going to start off by saying how I went from one job to another job and how different they were. Okay.
Okay.
I started in the pharmaceutical business. Okay. I worked for two small drug companies. I worked for two small companies, drug companies. Okay.
Okay, we'll just start off. You seem like you have a good idea. Okay, Chad, you can start.
Yeah, good. You're good to go.
Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Well, Chad.
Yes.
Okay, I first started out of college. My oldest brother has told me get into sales, and so I got into sales. And what I did was to start. I was early 20s. I started for two pharmaceutical companies, two smaller companies. At that time, then that drug industry was clamped down because of foreign drugs, et cetera, and the government slammed down on the USDA. So I looked around and I thought, well, somewhere along the line came across this interview with a company called Standard Fruit and Steamship Company. They're out of New Orleans, and so I interviewed with them. I wasn't too sure that I wanted to go that direction. But so anyway, I was hired by them and I worked out of Chicago. Now this goes back, in the history of banana business. Bananas used to be brought in only by on stems, and then they would bring them into the banana rooms, and then they would ripen them in the banana rooms. These are the local jobbers. In Chicago was a lot of Greeks and Italians, and I could remember the guy that the guy I worked for was, Howard Nielsen was an old timer, been there a long time. So he was a few years away from retirement. So anyway, I was thinking that, well, possibly I would probably stay in Chicago, but no, anyway, as it turns out that the company sent me down to, we got married, Dottie and I got married, and then we went to, one of my first trips was down to Honduras. Honduras was a big plantation at that time for Dole.
Because people don't know what year this is, can you tell them the year?
1965,
55. Okay.
I mean, 66. Wait a minute.
You guys were married in 63.
Okay, so it was 64.
1964.
So then so one of the first things I did was a trip to Honduras. Now, Honduras is a big growing area. One valley was where Dole grew all their bananas at that time. It wasn't called Dole. Didn't even have a label on the bananas at the time, but it was, they put them in boxes and blah, blah, blah. And then, so I went down there with a group of guys, from the company. And then, so that was one trip that I did with them. And then, as time went on, I took customers down to Honduras. I did a lot of different things, working with Dole. And, I started, of course, in Chicago, Indianapolis, to Milwaukee to Cincinnati, and several years in Cincinnati. Great years in Cincinnati.
You have all those stories in Ecuador, right? With the pilots and everything.
Well,
did you have anything in Honduras? Is there anything memorable?
Well, I tell you one thing. Yeah, one thing in Honduras, I remember when I first went down there, we took two planes that went in over the mountains and into the valleys where they grow the bananas. They don't, the mountain ranges sort of block the weather as far as the hurricanes and stuff like that. So anyway, we went down, we were flying down one plane and then another plane. So these two planes, they took off at different times. One plane got a little bit later. So, and actually, the two planes, we left the window, and one plane was passed right over us. Like they didn't even see us. There's no airports, there's no, radar, there's no nothing, and that. So, and then another trip I took down to Honduras was with a customer, and we were flying in, and we go into the plantation, and then they're going to take us down to this port in a city, and so the company's hires this pilot to fly us, and he speaks no English, okay, and so we're sitting in the plane, and the two of us, and we're going straight down. You could see down the valley, you could see the Caribbean Sea, you could see it, so you see it. But all of a sudden, he takes a right turn into the mountains. Now he turns and we're going not over the mountains, but sort of through a valley, and then it gets raining, coming and socked in. And Terry Cook was with me, and he's a customer, and he said from Super Value, and he said, "Oh, don't worry, he's got the instruments." I said, "You see a radar screen in front of you on that plane?" It was, it's a twin engine, 4-seater plane. And I said, "No." I said, so he was flying by compass. And and then of course we came out and we went to the port. I mean, they don't have airports; they just have a runway down there. So you fly into this runway, and it's pretty much hit the pilot. So the pilot sits in the plane, and when we go into the port to see what the port's facilities were, okay, and so we go there, and Terry, and then as we come back, it's pouring rain, and the Terry says, he says that we're starting on the runway, and the pilot looks up and points out to a brightness in the sky, like, not a clearing in the sky, a brightness. And he points to that. We didn't speak English, so Terry says, "Oh God, let's go. I'm tired." And Terry I said, "Terry," I said, "Okay, what's he gonna do?" So it turned around, he flies into that little hole in the sky. It gets above the clouds, and we're flying down the coast, here again by compass, flying down the coast. And my phrase, thing. And of course, when we fly back, and then we flew back, and then you fly back, you don't fly in like a 747 plane going back to well, actually flew to New Orleans, and you don't fly. You're flying in DC-3s. Now these are World War II type planes.
Yeah.
And we're sitting on a plane, and there's pipes. It's a semi-cargo plane and everything else, and stuff rattling around there. And so it was amazing. So and we flew back down. We flew back, and Terry's flying back. She said, "I'm getting sick." I said, "Terry, after all of the flying around we've been doing, and now you're telling me to get sick? No way can you get sick, So, but yeah, we flew down. So there's a lot of those trips we took. They are side trips, and we went across one place we're driving it, and company, and it was a Christopher Columbus fort I guess it was in Honduras, an old fort that was concrete type or rock, whatever it was, and it was supposedly Christopher Columbus's one of the forts that he had built down there. Anyway, so that was one trip that I could remember. Another trip I took down to Honduras was when I took it was several of us went down. I had customers. Another group. I took a several Super Value. One who ran Fargo, one for Super Value Fargo, one for Super Value in Wisconsin, and then one in Champaign. So there were three of us that went down as a group. I took them, and we went down went down and we went down, and then as a side trip, we went back to the islands called Roatan. Roatan Islands are beautiful islands off the coast of Honduras, and we went there and stayed at a place that was a beautiful resort, and so we stayed there a couple of nights. So, and then I said, you want to go, talk about scuba diving? He said, oh yeah. I said, well, none of them had ever been in the ocean before. No. So I said, I said, okay, let's go snorkeling and, snorkel up a coral reef down there. And as we're snorkeling down there, and one of the guys, Jim Lear, Lehman, he didn't have a bathing suit, so he said, I can't go. And I said, no, he's a big guy, I said, let's go in and get you one, and get on out there with us. There's sort of a gazebo out there. It sits on the end of this reef, and God, we were on there. And so, and yet all these other guys that kept on yelling, get off that reef. They kept on wanting to stand on the reef. And of course, sort of destroys the reef, and of course, you can cut yourself too.
Yeah.
So then, finally, but Jim, he was the guy who at least likely to do all what he did. He yells to me, he says, God, I saw a big northern pike out here. And I said, northern pike? What are you talking about? And then I swam out there, and it was a barracuda. And I said to Jim, he says, that's a barracuda, and so, but he was mesmerized by that. He was really an interesting guy, really nice guy, and a good customer of mine in Fargo, North Dakota, for Super Value that ran that division. And so then another time I went down to Honduras, I was with a group of managers, regional managers, or what do you want to call it? And we went down there to the port city because we first started getting into container business. So we had a container port that we went down to look at. And then we went down to look at this port, go to this port, a ship rather. It was by the dock, container ship, while they're ready to load it, getting it loaded. And all the other guys were running around the ship, and I just came across, started talking to the captain. He was Swedish. So I said, I was talking to him. I said, I said, my mother was from PTO. And oh, yeah, amazing. Blah. So they invited me up to the guys run around for an hour or so. I'm up there in the captain's quarters with the officers, and so I got a long history of how they do it, as far as they're on 2 months and then they're off a month or whatever. And that ship usually just went from Honduras to New Orleans or Gulfport, and so that was very interesting. Because when I was talking to they said, "Hey, would you want some?" They poured me some. They were going to pour me some Cavassier or something, like some French, drink, brandy. And I said, I said, do you have any Akavik? And they looked at me like I was a stranger. That's a Swedish drink, Akavik. And they looked at me, well, we don't drink that stuff. They drink just higher end Cavassier. So, and so that was very interesting, and very interesting talking to them, and about my ancestors. So,
Grandpa, where were you? What were you doing with these buyers in Honduras? Why did you take them?
Well, they're all seeing what the operations are like, how they run. The buyers, they're they were, first of all, it's a trip for them, you know. It's sort of like, you know, come down, enjoy this, you know, come down with, we, you know, of course, the wine and dine them and whatnot. So, oh, and one other time I was down there, in fact, I was down there with Terry Cook, I think, at that time. And we were in a restaurant in La Ceiba, Honduras. And then off the shore, there was like a look like you could see sort of a military boat. I mean,
Talk
Was
a little
when
bit about that.
when was this happening? Like when was
I don't know what year it was, but it was when Reagan was.
were you working?
president.
You were working though.
Yeah, I was working with Dole. I
How
mean,
did that impact your work?
well, it didn't impact necessarily our work, but it was about the in that period of time is when the Contras, which was Nicaragua, which is close to next to Honduras, and they were a communist country, or became communist. And then the U.S. government backed a group called the Contras to battle or go in and disrupt or take over Nicaragua.
Is this when they put you in Ecuador or
No, nothing to do with that. I was there. I was there, and at that time in that restaurant, and Terry Cook and I were there, and then of course there was a ship, U.S. ship off the coast, a military ship, and so we were in there with the captain. The captain, and his officers were there in the restaurant, and so when we left the restaurant, all of a sudden, boom, off the intersection, you know, they were blocking or protecting these officers, so they had all these Suburbans that cut the corners off so out of the streets so no one could come in. And so I just said to Terry, we were walking out at the same time. I said, let's go back in and forget about this.
because they were fighting?
Well, I mean, it could have been violence. I mean, it could have been, you know, it could have been there. The communists would come back, or the Nicaraguan would attack, you know. So, yeah, especially because it's a military ship. Not that it was really in play, but that was a period of time Ronald Reagan was, you know, battling that, and that goes on about that. That's a different story altogether in history. You know.
Do you want to talk about your trip to Ecuador?
Well, later we took a trip. It was myself. Now there was other trips I took to Costa Rica, blah blah blah, and many trips there. And in fact, I went down there. Well, let's go forward before when this is working for Dole. A group of us went down to Ecuador. Ecuador is a huge growing area, from Guayaquil to Bolivar and the growing areas. And so we went down there, and since we started importing from that area, so this group, we went down to take a look at, you know, the operations, like most of the time you go down there. And so coastline, as I say, the coastline is pretty much, then of course you got the Andes Mountains, which are, you know, big. So we went and saw all these plantations, blah blah blah, and traveled for a couple of days. And of course, every time you go across the plantation, they're anxious to show you, you know, to show you their operations, blah blah blah. These are all independent growers. And so as we went back we were going to go back home, and we decided that we'd like to go to Quito, which is the capital of Ecuador. It's up in the Andes Mountains, like 9,000 feet up, you know, way up, or it's way up in the mountains. So we thought we'd catch a plane, but it was Holy Week, so there was no plane we could take. So we decided, well, we'll just rent a car and drive up the Andes Mountains. Well, the company said, no, you can't do that. So we got into a car with a taxi cab, actually. And of course, it was one of the older cars. You know, of course, probably newly painted, looked like it was new. And so we started driving. We had the cabbie, the guy who drove. I go, he couldn't speak English. One guy could speak a little Tex-Mex type, and so we went. We were driving, and as we're going up the mountains, you don't go straight up. Actually, you have to sort of go, well, like wind your way up, the mountains. And as we're going up on, the cab would stop. He'd pull over and he'd get out of the car, open up the latch, and climb into the motor and adjust the carburetor. Because as you're going up the mountain, you have to, in L's cars, you had to adjust the carburetor so you could go up the mountain. And so I just couldn't believe it. This little guy, of course, he get back in the car and we driving more and more. And then just like 150 miles. Well, 150 miles. It took us like 9 hours.
Crazy.
We stopped along the way in one little.
And it's uphill, right? You're
going up.
Were you going up?
You're going. What do you call it?
Was it just street and then like
No,
5,000
God,
foot?
you look right over the side. There's no guard. Yeah.
No
No,
guard.
you look over the side of the road and you think, holy Christmas, and of course the buses. We always used to laugh and think the buses pass cars on the highway, and they're racing. I think they had if they could race and get more passengers, and it was bizarre and scary. And then as we're driving towards darkness, this cab driver started driving toward the other guy's headlights, and I said, I think he had night blindness. I mean, the guy, holy good. And then as he getting close to the light, he pulled to the right, and oh God, it was scary.
Because it's just 2 lane. It's a 2 lane highway.
2 lane highway.
Yeah, it's the same
not
way.
a highway. It's a
Road.
The same way in Mexico.
Yeah,
and people are just passing.
And you just going up and zagging. So it took us a long time to drive those 150 miles.
Who drove you?
These are cab drivers.
Oh, okay. Could you imagine driving that yourself?
Rent a cab. Oh, wow.
Because that was the plan. That's what you wanted.
The company said no way.
I would have trusted you. I would have trusted.
It's funny how things were. But when we get to the capital of now, when you're down in the jungle, by the growing areas and everything else, it's pretty. It's not nice. It's when you get to Quito, though, the capital, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's the streets are all clean. It's really nice. The hotels were really nice hotels, and so we stayed there and went over to the equator, etc. There's a marker where you can go to the equator in Ecuador. So that was a very interesting trip, a very interesting thing. Yes. And then I remember one of the guys there, of course, they're much into the bartering system there,
Yeah.
You sit down there, and I remember one part. I said, they said the company always said, well, go on across the street. They don't want you wandering around the city, So it's right across the street. They always have vendors out there. So we went to the vendor. I was out there. There was a whole group, maybe 10 guys out there trying to sell something, and I saw serape. In fact, they still have that serape. And I saw some serape. So I started, and of course, I think it was sucres in Ecuador. And I said, it was like 400 sucres or something like that, which was about $5 or $6,
Yeah.
And beautiful. I mean, thinking, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, okay, I take it. All of a sudden, all the under vendors like, we got a live one here. He paid top price. So they always how they're all sitting around and trying to show you something to sell you. So
and you're white.
Yeah.
You're a white American too. You're
yeah, gringo.
yeah.
And so I was very, very interesting, and that part of the world and the Andes Mountains are just, unbelievably beautiful.
Is that the furthest south you went? Is it Ecuador? Is that you didn't go anywhere? You didn't go to Chile?
No. At that time, we weren't involved. The company did want me to go. Well, I when we started getting involved in imports into Chile, which means grapes and a lot of other stuff that they exported at that time from Chile. And so they had our offices were in San Francisco at that time, and so then the guy that headed up this new Chilean operation, who ran the East Coast in bananas, Ed Delvacaro, he called me up and he said to me, "Hey, I need a right hand man to come here to California, to San Francisco." And I said, "Does that mean driving an hour?" Now, first of all, I had all my children were in high school, so I said, "Does that mean driving an hour and a half one day, 1 hour and a half to get to work, and then an hour and a half to go home?" He said, "You want to freeze your ass off in Minnesota or come where the action is?" I said, "I think I'll choose the former." So
I have a couple questions, Grandpa.
Yeah.
Was it obvious? Okay, one, what did Grandma write you letters? How long were you in these countries? And did Grandma write you letters?
No, they were that was that.
Did you have the little phone call? Did you have to? Did you?
No, never talked to anybody. You didn't. I didn't communicate while I'm there.
That's crazy.
No.
How long were you there for?
Well, these trips, there were 3-4 days, depends upon it. I can't remember exactly when, how many, and how long.
So there were only 3 to 4 days. Usually?
Yeah, you aren't going to sit down there and you
Drink a pina colada on the ocean.
No, none of that. None of that. It's just sort of like when you're down there and you're seeing the operations, and so. But the company was, when I started, as I say, it was Standard Fruit and Steamship Company. And then I was in fact, one of the things that I had, the advantages, is that when I was in Cincinnati, Standard Fruit and Steamship Company was bought out. Income walked in and bought out controlling interest in Standard Fruit, which was the D'Antoni family, bought all of D'Antoni stock. So then I was able to buy through my. We knew that they're going to have to come for the rest of the stock. So it was hard to find Standard Fruit stock but through the guy I worked with, he said he got a hold of some stock, and I got 100 shares. Now I got 100 shares. It cost me $4,200 for 100 shares, I think, at that time. And what I did, I didn't have the money for it, so I borrowed it from my mom and dad. And with that, 6 months later, the company, in other words, I made $100 a share. I made about $10,000.
Okay.
So that's when I got a chance to buy my home. That's when I got a chance to buy stock and invest in stuff like that. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Do you?
We're getting sidetracked.
Yeah. Did you? So when you went, was it obvious how much land the United Fruit Company owned? Was it like was it acres of acres of acres of acres of plantation?
Oh God!
Like as far as the eye could see.
You're flying down on in the tropics.
Where you went?
Oh, in Honduras, huge.
Because there's a reason why they were called banana republics. Because the United Fruit Company.
Oh, well, yeah.
Because they own so much land.
Yeah, United Fruit Company, which was Chiquita, which at that time they were the largest.
But can you describe what you saw when you went down there? Like how much?
Oh God, they were just huge plantations. I mean, just flying over them. And of course, I mean, and then of course to see the watering of all the plants, all that stuff. Naturally, there's a lot of water around her, but but bananas like, they like a lot of water, and then also with down there at that time they started growing pineapples down there in Honduras. So we went and saw a banana operate. We saw a lot of operations.
Was it just hundreds of people working on these plantations, or were
Oh
they?
yes, hundreds, hundreds.
And they had the
it's like-
machetes. Where did you get the
Oh,
machetes?
oh, machete. I mean, I got all these machetes from down there, when I was making on the trips down there. So I always came across some of them, machetes, of different sizes, different types. So they're in their scabbards, which is, what they hold, which is real nice. But anyway, I had the collection up on a wall in my office of all of them. And I've got a lot of stuff from them. But if you could visualize a jungle, mountains around you, and then all of a sudden these plantations over the years. Chiquita, what changed the industry a lot was the variety of bananas that were growing in Central America at that time. The variety was called a Gros Michel. Well, the trouble is the Gros Michel was subject to Panama disease. So they had to, how the plantations grew was they had to flood the operations and then keep on growing bananas and expanding the plantations. So then the came across the Cavendish variety, which was what Dole, or Standard Fruit at that time, had that variety, and that was the variety that was not susceptible to the Panama disease. So that is always a problem in the tropics. You got disease, etc. So that's and there's a book written. It's called "The Fish That Swallowed the Whale," and it's something I did online. I got the book online, and it's a story about how Chiquita. I'll tell you quickly the story. The story is before World War II, and this is when it was about Chiquita and our United Fruit Company at that time. And so anyway, this immigrant from Russia came to the United States, a Russian Jew, Sam Samaria. The story is about him, how he started off as when the ships come in, this is all on stems. As they come off, he would buy all the broken stems or the ripe ones, and then he'd sell them locally. Well, then he found out that maybe by train, a rail car, you could take them up to Memphis and get a lot more money for them. And anyway, he went on and started growing in the tropics, etc., and built up this whole operation, and wound, and then he became on the board of United Fruit Company, or which is Chiquita, or what, and God, he was so unbelievably, what he did, and he wound up owning the company, or becoming president of Chiquita, or United Fruit Company. So he started off as this immigrant from Russia, and grew this fantastic business, and so
That you were lucky to be a part of.
no, I wasn't part of it. I was just telling you about him, and then of course, Standard Fruit. It's so many stories about. I'm not stories, history. They're really kind of hard to talk about them all. So,
Chad, do you think that's good enough for today, or
Yeah,
Long
we're
to-
probably fine.
talk about more
Okay.
about Ecuador, about the plane trip, or?
no, to talk about. We can talk. That's good enough, I think.
Yeah.
Go down memory lane, remember more things. So
Yeah, these are
and
stories. These are stories I haven't heard.
I get sidetracked, and everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you haven't heard about our trip down to Jamaica, and that.
No, tell grandma to bring her bottom in here and tell.
Oh, she, and not only that, but on that trip, Oh, never mind. That was another trip. We'll talk about that later,
All right, so
okay?
next week, hopefully.
And I can
Yeah,
always-
hopefully we can
we'll
reel
talk to you
grandma
after.
into this.
I want to get you a chance to talk about when I was in Cincinnati and I was in the winter circle with a horse.
Yeah. All right, Grandpa's
We're good.
calling nematodes nematodes.
No.
Are they
Nematodes, which are in the ground.
nematodes?
They grow. But that's a different story. You're getting sidetracked now.
No, it says a SpongeBob reference.